for dead and so are you. Don't know what's real, don't know what's true. Oh, why did we let it get so far? 'Cause now I'm dead and so are you. No, I've never ever said it all before. Got messed up, broke down, rotten to the core. Wake up from this war. Wake up, selfish you. Wake up, kill this dream, 'cause I can't leave you, I won't leave you now. I'm wide awake and so are you. We're left to believe that it's all true. No, I've never heard you say it all before. Locked up, got stuck, crawling on the floor. Yeah. Wake up from this war. Wake up, selfish soul. Wake up, kill this dream, 'cause I can't leave you, I won't leave you now. Wake up, take what's yours. Wake up, like before. Wake up, take me by the hand and lead me through this open door. Did you feel it from the start? Was there something missing all along? Would you change it if you could? Would you fake it till the end? I'm left for dead and so are you. Don't care what's real, don't care what's true. No. Wake up from this war. Wake up, selfish you. Wake up, I need to end this pain inside, 'cause there's no us no more. No more. No more. 'Cause I will leave you, I need to leave you now.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Ben from Universal Audio, and welcome back to yet another Monday office hours. How's everybody doing? We made it over 100. We're now on to episode 101, and this one is going to be nowhere near as long as the 100th episode. And most importantly, we're gonna go a little bit slower. We're gonna spend a little bit more time, and today we're gonna highlight a bunch of sample-based music making workflows. So if you work with samples, with loops, with one-shots, with warp editing, with chopping, moving stuff around, today we're gonna kind of walk over all of the different ways of doing sample-based music making inside of Luna. And to help me do that, I brought along a couple friends. We got Matt, we got Drew. How you guys doing today?
Doing good.
Good,
How
man.
you
What's
been?
going on?
It's I'm actually really looking forward to this show because this is one of my favorite ways to make music, is to like start with some samples, start with some a seed of an idea, and then using plugins, chopping, editing, messing around with it to transform it into something else, and then keep building on that. So this is definitely a way of working that's very familiar and dear to me. But how about you guys? I know, Matt, you do a lot of this sort of music making as well, correct?
Yeah, I do a lot of sample-based stuff. Love chopping up things, sampling off of vinyl. Yeah, taking something and completely flipping it into something else. That's my jam.
Yeah, so for me, I'm gonna be the odd man out. I'm gonna be the student. You guys are gonna be my teacher today, because this is, as an engineer working mostly with acoustic music, this is not necessarily up my alley. But I'll be contributing a few things here that hopefully people will find useful. But yeah, I'll be a student as well, guys. So forgive me if I ask a lot of questions as we go.
Oh, that's ideal. And Shane's asking if there's going to be other channel strips coming down the pipeline. We can't talk about future products, but we can talk about this episode, because we're going to talk about, I think is Drew, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the last channel strip in our deep dive series, correct?
Yeah, I believe it was. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this was the only one. We almost forgot it. We tried to shoehorn it in. We tried to get it into that 100th episode, right? Given
it would have been too appropriate, right?
It would have been too appropriate, and we couldn't quite. There was just way too many tips going on. So, and yeah, I do believe it is the last one. So yeah, we're gonna have that at the end. So
nice. So yeah, if you guys
Stay tuned.
The Century Tube channel strip, if you guys missed it in the title there, we'll be checking that one out. And this is one that, again, a big favorite of mine. I use this one all the time, especially when I'm working on like an Apollo solo or something, a little bit less DSP, and I just need some good sounds really quick. We'll walk you guys through how to do that with the Century Tube channel strip. And of course, as always, we've got a bit of a show planned here for you guys. But if you do have questions along the way, throw them in the chat. We'll definitely hit those up. And before I forget, make sure you guys have already subscribed to the YouTube channel, because we do this every single week. And most importantly, every couple of weeks, we do something big and crazy. This week, that's tomorrow. We've got Black Pumas performing live on stream. I'm so excited for this show. You guys, oh man, I've been a fan of theirs ever since, the first time I heard Colors. I was like, yep, I love these guys. Can't wait to see what they do. And tomorrow we'll be hearing from them live from their studio in Austin, Texas. And they'll be playing through the UA effects pedals, playing some music, hanging out, geeking out about pedals and tones. So definitely don't miss that show. It's a little bit later in the day. It's 2 p.m. Pacific time. So it's in the afternoon. It's a great time of day to kick back and enjoy some jams from the band. So don't forget, subscribe to this YouTube channel. You'll never miss any of those shows. If you hit the little notification thing, your phone will buzz, and you'll just be made aware of every single time we go live and do release any videos. So that's number one. Number two, it's the store-wide half yearly sale going on right now. So if there have been plugins that you've been having a close eye on, if there's something you've seen us bring up here on the show that you're like, I think I've been thinking if you've been on the fence about buying a plugin, it doesn't get much better of a deal than what they got going on right now. I think it's the whole store is at least half off. And if you do the custom bundles, you can save even more. And this is both UAD and Luna stuff. So if you haven't already checked that out, if you somehow missed all those emails or the ads around on social media, this is me telling you, don't forget, because it only goes until the end of June. So there's, you still got a couple of weeks here to make a decision, but definitely don't miss out on that. And last announcement, I guess, before we start diving in is, as always, if you guys want to be featured in our countdowns, we love hearing music from you guys. I Googled, I think, 2 out of 3 of the bands that I heard in today's countdown, trying to be like, who's this? Where'd this come from?
It's a lot of stuff that grabs your ear.
It does, man. So if you guys have got music that you'd like to contribute, hit us up, send an MP3 and a little description about how you guys are using Universal Audio or Luna as a part of your music making. Hit us up live@uaudio.com. It's an email address. Send music in there. Henry will help get you sorted. And then, of course, for photos, just hashtag Universal Audio on Instagram, Facebook, and all the social medias, and that's how we find those pictures. It's really fun getting to look into other people's studios and see some really cool setups. It's awesome seeing all the pedals in these shots now as well. And you guys, of course, everyone's excited about the Townsend Labs Universal Audio acquisition. Dude, we are also extremely excited about this. So yeah, the Sphere mic and the team there from Townsend are joining UA. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting seeing what happens with that. There's nothing's gonna change in the interim. All the plugins are being supported. The mic will continue to work as it's been working. supplies, I believe, are kicking up as well. So that way people with orders are going to start getting them. It's just a good thing all around, as well as what the future holds for that.
Yeah, we featured it on the show a few times, and I'm sure it won't be the last time we feature it.
Exactly. The one to me sales. Victor's already said he's got all he needs, and I doubt it, Victor. There's got to be something you haven't got yet.
Yeah, tell us which you don't have, and we'll tell you which ones you need.
Exactly.
Somebody asked about the UF8. As far am I using the UF8 with Luna? We back in January we previewed MCU support on Luna and said that it was coming sometime this year, and we're still on track to do that. There's no timetables to announce, but so yeah, we're testing it. And when we'll have a full list of supported devices, on when we do launch. So nothing definitive on any of that, but just stay tuned and keep tuning in.
Hell yeah. All right. Scrolling back through the comments here real quick to make sure we're not missing any other questions. There's a birthday in the chat, I believe. Is that
really?
Daniel Eriks?
Yeah, it was Eric. Oh. Yep, Daniel Eriks.
Nice.
Happy birthday, Daniel. Yeah. Someone also mentioned the Helios, as far as channel strips goes. I mean, generally speaking, channel strip applies to, mic pre, EQ, and dynamics. That's like kind of, I don't know how loose of a definition that is, but I think that's probably a pretty accurate definition. So yeah, so you might have noticed we haven't done 1084s, we haven't done 1073, we haven't done Helios, because I don't think they fall into that channel strip category. But we can certainly go through them. Once we're done with the channel strips, heck, we're gonna just go down the list. It seems like you guys are, it seems like everybody's really into these deep dives. So yeah, we'll keep on going. We won't stop at the last channel strip. That's for sure.
Yeah. Is there a different, my home recording experience asking, is there a difference between the API pre that's on the channel strip and the new API pre standalone? I believe it's the same between the two, right? It's just the
same
mic
modeling,
portion.
but yeah, it has a dedicated line input and a dedicated mic input, and then also a high pass in it, which a dedicated mic high pass. So whereas the previous channel strip just had the one set of filters, now in the new channel strip you have a separate high pass for the mic and a separate high pass for the line. And when used in conjunction with Luna, you can actually use them both at the same time. You can have the API in the unison slot and have that high pass, but then you also still get access to the rest of the filtering in the channel strip. So in that sense, there was some added features and functionality, which is pretty cool.
Nice. Oh yeah, and of course, missed the headline of what's already happened this morning. 1.1.9 is out. We did a little preview at the end of episode 100, showing off the new nudge features. There's a couple other little keyboard shortcuts that have been added for like selecting all tracks and for deleting selected tracks. So yeah, if you haven't already opened up Luna for the day, open up Luna. You'll see an update should pop up for you. Hit that update and unlock the new nudge functionality. We'll be able to show that a bunch here throughout today's show, talking about samples anyways. All right, guys. Keep on chiming in if you got good questions. We'll keep on hitting it, but otherwise I think it's time for us to dive into talking about making sample-based music with Luna. So I guess before we kind of jump in and start showing you guys a bunch of different tricks and different ways to deal with these, let's talk just a little bit about like what are samples, what types of samples we're going to refer to, and I guess most notably there's loops, right? That go from like Splice or those old-fashioned sample CDs back in the day. So you can have drum loops, instrument loops, vocal loops. You can make loops out of your own music. You can sample yourself playing guitar, keyboards. You can. There's really no limit to where samples can come from. But so a loop is basically a piece of audio that you would then play back to back to back, and that's kind of what you construct your song around. There's one shots, which are most often like drum hits or effects. Whether like cymbals, stuff that you kind of place once and they don't loop. That's essentially the difference between those. So a lot of, like I mentioned, you can sample yourself, playing a part in, or I'll do this a lot of times. I'll record with the voice memo app on my phone. Just record sounds that you hear that sound cool that you may want to like sound design with later, or pull apart like the washing machine doing its rumble and then turn that into a drum loop. Like there's to me the coolest thing about this is the fact that it marries together like music and sound design, and creating something out of nothing can be a lot of fun to do with samples. And And of course,
What are your favorite sources, Ben? Where do you find most of your stuff? Are you doing a combination of mixing stuff, of making your own stuff, found sound type stuff like you said, or and also sources? Do you have any tips for people that?
I mean, for me personally, I'm kind of addicted to Splice.
Yeah.
for
Okay.
being able to quickly find sounds and be able to look up like I want a Wurlitzer loop that's at like 100 BPM in the key of A flat. There's no shortage of those over there on
Nice.
Splice. So you can define by key, by tempo, by mood, by instrument type. So that's been my go-to. But then like I said, I do a fair amount of iPhone sampling, and those are a good mixture of like either sounds you hear in the world or me late night in front of the TV coming up with something cool on the guitar and just pressing record on my phone real quick to keep it forever. And so yeah, those are kind of my main sources. But speaking of sources, one of the cool things I see a lot of people do is sampling from like YouTube videos or from other songs, through Spotify, being able to, kind of the old or sampling off vinyl too, right, Matt? Like sampling musical sources and then chopping those up and creating something new out of those. And of course, sampling stuff that way, of course, goes without saying, don't steal, like don't make money off of something that you didn't create, like create something new out of it. And that's part of what we're going to really focus on today is like manipulating samples and making them your own. So they're not just a straight copy of somebody else's work. But of course, we've kind of highlighted this a few times when we talked about virtual channels, right? Using virtual channels to route audio from your browser into Luna are a great way of doing it. And of course, you can also do it just by setting an input to monitor left to right, record enabling that track, and then it's a really quick, easy way to sample something in from your browser if you're doing that sort of thing.
What about how about pitch? You were talking about changing the key or pitch or something. DJ T is asking about that in the chat.
Yeah, well, I've got that here in the list. We'll talk about clip pitch
okay,
here
awesome.
in a
Yeah,
little
yeah,
bit. Yeah,
yeah.
so
Awesome.
that's one of my favorite things to do with clips. So yeah, stay tuned. We'll talk about changing pitch around with those. But I think a good place to start would be here with Matt, kind of talking about time stretching and warping. So we're gonna assume that you have a source for samples. We talked a little bit about where you can get them from, what you can make them out of. So now let's bring them into a session and start messing around with them and doing some stuff. So Matt, I'll let you kind of take it and get some basics going here about how to deal with samples.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I got a bunch of Splice samples like Ben was talking about. Splice is a great place to find samples because it's so searchable. But yeah, I'll kind of start building a track up from drums and adding on top of it. So I just have a basic drum loop going on right now. It's at 100 BPM. My project tempo is also at 100 BPM. So yeah, kind of the most common thing that I'll run into when I'm dragging samples into a session. For example, let me drive some hi-hats in here. So I got this hi-hat loop that's at 86 BPM, says it right here in the header, whereas my project and my other samples are at 100. So that's kind of the first hurdle that you usually run into when you're working with sample-based material is that things don't always line up perfectly, especially if you're pulling things down off Splice. So yeah, the thing that I use all the time is, and Luna makes it super easy to do this, if I basically want to time stretch this sample to fit the sample that I already have in here and to fit the BPM of my project, you can hold down the control key and then just grab the end of the clip just like you would normally do to trim. But while you're holding down the control, it'll actually time stretch it. So I can drag it back to match the 2 bars that I have going on here. It'll automatically time stretch the sample, and then it's automatically in time with the 100 BPM sample that I already have in here. So yeah,
It's like if there's like one warping trick that you guys need to know, I'd say it's that one. It's remembering control and then pulling using the trim at the end. This is the quickest, easiest way to just like bring a loop in, shrink it up to exactly the tempo of your session, and then start working. Totally.
Yeah, I use that so much for sample-based stuff. And Luna's like really forgiving with time stretching. I mean, the warp algorithms are really great. Especially if drums, if you set it to something like Razorblade, which really puts all the emphasis on preserving the transients. I mean, I just pretty much double time this sample. And you can hear a little bit of artifacts, but even time stretching it just a little bit that I did, can barely even tell that it's been time stretched. It sounds pretty natural. All the transients are intact. So Luna's really great at handling that stuff.
Nice.
And often those artifacts they're kind of cool too, in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're doing like lo-fi stuff or just more experimental stuff, and you can definitely hear the the time stretching going on when I double time that hi-hat, but it
Yeah.
could be kind of cool for whatever you're going for, especially if you're
Yeah.
doing like some more
Yeah.
synth-based stuff.
Well, and that's something that we're going to talk about here is like the difference between all these different warp algorithms. There's some functionality. There's some function reasons why you would pick one over the other, but most importantly, we'll talk about the sonics of them here in a minute. So yeah, it's super important to know first of all how to just get stuff warped up, but then you have some options into the algorithm that does the warping.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, now I got a basic drum loop going on with some hi-hats. So let's talk about the tempo versus time mode, which is probably one of the next things you run into when you're working with sample-based material, especially when you get to changing your BPM in your session. So yeah, I have everything at 100 BPM right now. Everything's perfectly lined up with the grid. Let's say I want to drop the BPM down to 90. So you see all of a sudden my clips aren't lined up with the grid anymore. And that's because these two tracks are in time mode right now, which basically that prioritizes the clip is always going to maintain the same amount of time even if the BPM changes, so it'll still play back at the same speed even though my session BPM is now 10 BPM slower.
Gotcha.
Let me bump it up back to 100.
So yeah, it is helpful, right? Like and there's a reason why audio tracks, like when you drag something in, they default to time. They assume that you're bringing in like say some stems for a multi-track, and you don't want them to automatically be eligible for being warped around. You assume that audio is audio, and you want these to play back as they are. Whereas like instrument tracks or newly created audio tracks, they're going to default to the tempo mode. Correct, Matt?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I mean, if you're doing like you're working with one shots or something like that, where you like the way the one shot sounds, you don't necessarily want to make it shorter or longer. Keeping it in time mode is good. For these kind of loop-based workflows, I find that tempo mode is a lot more useful. So let me switch both these tracks to tempo. And that basically just locks the clips to follow now the tempo of the session. So if I drop it down to 90, just like I did before, now my clips automatically time stretch, so they're still on grid, they still take up the same amount of time, and they'll actually play a little bit slower. But again, Luna's warp algorithms are really solid, so I don't really hear too many artifacts going on from dropping the BPM, which is awesome. It gives you a lot of freedom to kind of drag things in, get them lined up, and then change the BPM after the fact to kind of get the right groove going.
Nice. Awesome. So now if you wanted to go inside of a clip and so right now we've been talking about warping clips as like a whole clip, right? Taking
Right.
a 2-bar loop, making that 2 bars fit into your normal 2 bars. Now, inside of each one of these clips, though, there are what they call they call them warp markers that allow you to kind of move individual bits inside of a sample. So say like the feel or the groove isn't quite locked in how you want it, or you want to change the rhythm around on a clip. How do people work with individual warp markers inside of a clip?
Yeah, for sure. So I just blew up the clip with E, so I can easily see all the transients and all the different parts of the audio. So the first thing you want to do when you want to go in and do these warp edits, basically moving different transients around, click the view menu right here where it says clips, and then change that to warps. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden I see these little pseudo warp markers that automatically get placed at the transient, at the start of the transient for every one of these drum hits. So Luna automatically places these. They're pseudo warp markers because once I click, I can actually place an actual warp marker, which gives me a handle that I can drag things around with. And you'll notice that since I just placed the single warp marker on this one little percussion sound, once I drag it, it's actually shifting everything else around. So there's a handy way that Luna has of dealing with this, which you can create bounded warps, which basically instead of clicking up here like I did the first time just to make a single warp marker, I can click in the bottom half of the clip and you'll see it pops up with these three, I guess that doesn't zoom on the cursor, but it pops up with these three little warp marker stocks. Mm-hmm. So if I click there, it's actually going to add a warp marker at the transient before where I clicked and after where I clicked. Nice. And the reason that's useful is now I can drag the middle warp marker, and it doesn't actually move everything else in the clip. It just moves that one little transient that I'd grabbed, and then it scales what's before it and after it to make it fit.
That's this little shortcut, guys, is so handy when you're like, man, everything about this is great, but this hi-hat's a little bit late or a little bit early. Like to be able to lock in, hey, don't move this. I want to just move this one in the middle. The fact that you can just single click and get that is so nice.
Yeah, it's a huge time saver. I mean, normally in another DAWs, I'd have to like double click here to create a warp marker, double click here to create a warp marker, and then I can go in and do what I actually want to do. Luna just makes it super easy. One click, and then I have all three, and now I can adjust what I want to adjust without affecting anything else.
And one of the cool things is you don't even have to tell it to analyze. I mean, Luna just analyzes everything automatically, seamlessly in the background. So you never even have to tell it to do it. It just does it, that's one of my favorite things about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, let me move this little percussion sound around just to give a little bit of variation here. I'll go into this second clip that I duplicated. Yeah, I'll do another bounded warp here. Maybe I'll move this kick a little bit just to add a little bit of variation. But yeah, it's super quick and easy. You can see I just did it in like 5 seconds there, and now I have some variation in my loop that I wouldn't have otherwise. So yeah, it's super handy.
That's awesome.
And if Luna, I find that Luna is like really, really good at placing these pseudo warp markers on the transients, but if it doesn't for whatever reason, you can still just come up here and double click wherever you want, and it'll add a new warp marker. But yeah, like Drew was saying, Luna is great at like auto detecting the transients and automatically placing them, so you don't really have to do too much of that manual transient marker placing, I find.
Nice. But so one more time, just real quick though, if you did want to make your own warp marker and say put it in the middle of a thing where that's not on transient, all you have to do is just click up there, right?
Yep, just click. It's kind of hidden behind the playhead, but yeah, you get this little warp marker. Then you can drag around just like you would the other warp markers to get automatically placed.
Nice. That's awesome. So that's a quick, easy way to warp it. Saw a couple of good questions here in chat. Oh, well, not just a question, but a statement by Danielle. Warped editing has saved hours of my life. Yep, I totally agree there, Danielle. District 7's like, would it be better to flip the feature so the top is able to grab all three? Well, I think they made it so the top is just easy, like Matt showed. You can add one and move, or you can add one in the middle. So making the one at the top, right next to where you would actually be making the moves, to me makes a lot of sense. And then the three, locking in the two sides, and the other one, putting that down below. It's the one that you're going to use sometimes, but more often than not, you're going to be doing just one at a time. So I think that's the design thinking there. And then I saw a really good comment I wanted to address from Mong for Surf. Was asking, I often jump in and record without setting the BPM, and I switch to record tracks to time and then switch BPM. This works, but MIDI gets reset. And you are 100% correct. So MIDI tracks are always going to be tempo bound. There's no option to make them time bound, which would instantly solve the issue that you're running into. Matt, are there any workarounds that you can think of that he could use?
I mean, one workaround would just be like to resample the MIDI clip into audio, which we're going to show a kind of more in-depth demo of this later. But for example, I have this MIDI clip down here. Say I wanted to time stretch it. It's not really easy to do with MIDI. I can create a new audio track. Set to stereo here. I can set the input to monitor left and right. And then I'm going to mute the track so it doesn't create a feedback loop. Then I'll solo the track that I want to resample. And now basically I can record the output of this bass track, which is MIDI, down to this audio track. Just like this. Yeah. And then I have an audio clip that I can come in here and easily time stretch. Just how I would, the way that we showed you at the top of the show. So, yeah, I mean, that's the way that I would do it. Anytime I want to mess with MIDI and time stretch it, I'll just basically bake it into an audio clip, and then it makes it a lot easier to work with in that way.
Nice. That's probably the best solution for now. And then hit the feedback button. Let them know, because I imagine there's plenty of people out there. Just let it roll. Start recording all sorts of tracks at 120 BPM, and then you're like, cool. Well, that song was actually at 85. Matt's trick of committing it to audio would then let you, now they're all audio tracks, be able to get around that. But to be able to shuffle around while keeping it MIDI, hit the feedback button, let the devs know that you'd like to see that feature, because they're constantly listening to you guys through that stuff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. So he's doing it with audio, but you can't go back and change instruments. That's the one downside there. So
could you export it? Could you export them and then change it, then re-import them? Export the MIDI clips, change the tempo, then re-import them?
Because it's all MIDI note data is down to beats and ticks. Yeah, it's all based around that. So yeah, if you change your tempo around, they're still going to be off.
Gotcha.
But I guess speaking of tempo, Drew, I wanted to, we kind of talked about manipulating clips and kind of making them fit to the timeline. the opposite of this is also true, right? Like you can
Yeah.
make the timeline follow your clips. So say you sample in, you're sampling something off a record. You can actually build a tempo map based off of that, and then drop in loops that automatically stretch and work to that. So I want
Yeah.
to walk people through how to do the tempo mapping inside of Luna.
Yeah, so this show was a little bit outside of my wheelhouse, but I tried to find some things that were so like I'm going to talk about tempo mapping and talk about them in a couple of different ways. So on this particular session, I have a really simple thing. This is a drummer who is a live drummer, not playing to a click, who is we're tracking it for the purposes of generating loops from it, right? So we want to create loops from it. So you might want to leave the feel that this drummer imparted into the track, or you might want to capture the performance, but have it, be constrained to your grid. So, a couple of things. So this would apply, and I'm going to switch to another session in a second, and where you can see that this entire workflow can work even with live bands, with full acoustic drums and everybody tracked. You can actually do this, and I'll show you that in a second. But let me start with a simple loop. So in this case, we're starting out with a track, and we want to make sure that it's in time mode, not tempo, because you don't want to be building a tempo map while tracks are in tempo mode, because they'll be shifting and trying to conform to that tempo map. And so if we were pretending that this were a song, one of the first things we want to do is we want to do something we've shown on the show before. We want to set bar one. So here it is in the edit menu. We have the ability to tell Luna what bar one is. So even though I'm going to chop this up for loops, I think just for the heck of it, I'm going to go ahead and do it in this case so we can see that. Mm-hmm. And so what that does is it changes your timeline, your ruler, your bars and beats ruler, to create just that as bar one, designating that as bar one. And then I'm going to hit play, and as you can see, when we have the first measure, and when we get to the second measure, based on the default tempo, which is, like we said, is 120, is here. So I'm going to tab the transient right to the edge of that, and then I'm going to there's a keyboard shortcut for it, but I'll do. But once you know it, you'll do this quite a lot, and that is align bar, and that is Option Command I. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to go ahead and choose that command. And one thing you'll notice once it tells you, okay, that's bar 2, which is pretty obvious. You'll notice that when I did that, it seemed like the audio changed, but it didn't. Only the tempo map changed. And so that's it's something that takes a little bit of getting used to, because that kind of looks like the audio has changed, but it has not. It's just been the tempo map.
Nice.
So I'm going to continue to do that same thing a few times. You can do this for as many times as you want. And again, it's going to just be, and you'll eventually, I'm using tab to transient. And here you want to, don't worry about where this grid position is. This is where it thinks it would be based on the speed of the measures before it. But what we're interested in is the actual transient. So when I do the Option Command I, you'll see that, again, it kind of looks like the audio moved, but it wasn't the audio. It was just the tempo map.
And you can see Drew's tempo ruler up there. It's starting to get point. You're starting to see those numbers across the top. Luna's calculating the exact tempo between each bar. And the cool thing about this, right, Drew? Right now you're showing us how to do it. If you go bar by bar,
Right.
If you got a pretty locked in drummer, you can actually do. Sometimes when I do this, I'll go like 4 bars or 8 bars and kind of do like section by section, and then listen or look and be like, oh, actually he's like a little bit ahead. And so sometimes I'll be lazy and just like try to do the whole thing really fast and just get like the major downbeats, but then go back in and refine this bar by bar as well.
Yeah, it really depends on the granularity that you want Luna to base the calculations on. At this point in time, the smallest unit of measure is a bar. So that in other words, the finest resolution is per bar. But like you said, if you're dealing with something that is where you're not worried about it quite so much, you can absolutely do that, and get a little bit less granularity in the calculations. So I don't have to do the whole thing. I just wanted to do a little bit just to give you an idea what we're talking about here. So let's just pretend this was a song, and when I switch to the other session, you'll actually see what happens here. But so what I've done here is I've built a tempo map. Nothing has been done to the audio at this point, despite the fact that the screen has moved around a lot. All we've done is we've conformed the grid to the audio. Now, one workflow is that we could theoretically be done here, and we could bring in, and I'll show you in the other session, we could bring in loops, we could bring in MIDI information that will now conform or we can perform MIDI into the session and then quantize and conform it to this grid. So we have built a grid. Another option is that I'll do in the other session in a second, but I can just preview it here, which is, and this is where the timing matters of when you do something, because right now, at this point, I want to, let's pretend I've done the whole song. At this point, I want to switch over to tempo mode. So I'm going to change this track to tempo mode, and right away, nothing has happened. It's now prepped for the next step, which would be what I could do at this point is, and again, it could be the whole song, is if I select up here in the ruler and I select those tempo events, I'm going to hit delete right now. And what's going to happen is it looks like nothing happened. This is, again, it's sort of a strange feeling. It's a strange sensation. It looks as if nothing has happened, but what has happened is, and you can see this by now looking at the audio, you will now see that every
it's all still
one
locked
of those,
in.
yeah, every single one of them has been locked to that grid position. So let me undo that, and I'm going to undo the tempo, the removal of the tempo, and now you can see that again. All of my, it's kind of a strange thing. They look the same right now, but that is not the same as that. That is all of the audio conformed to the same tempo. I know it's a mind game here, but that's the reality of it.
But this is such a cool workflow, because basically what Drew just showed you guys is that you can go through, you can take a live drummer, or take a lot of times, like if you're sampling a record from, say, a decade before click tracks were really popular, right?
Yep.
They float around. They're kind of in a tempo. If you're taking break beats, like this is a great way to say, cool, here's my 8-bar loop that I sampled in, but man, its tempo is kind of sliding all around. If you do that step, if you do what Drew just showed you, kind of align the bars, build a tempo map, you've now locked in that clip to downbeats. You've locked it in. So now you've got 8 bars that are locked in, and the tempo is going all up and down. But now when you switch the track from time mode to tempo mode and then delete the tempo map, now those downbeats are still locked into downbeats, and it's automatically done all of the math and all the stretching and warping of the audio to be perfectly on the beat. So it's, of course, you could do this the other way around. You could do it the way Matt showed you guys, right? Where you could stretch the loop out and then go in and do warp markers and move your downbeats into the right spot. You could do it that way, or what Drew just showed you is kind of this counterintuitive, slightly backwards way of doing it that leads to the same result. But
I resent that remark.
Well, it's counterintuitive, right? Like you wouldn't think,
Yeah,
let me
it
build
is.
a tempo map to then lock my drums into a certain tempo.
Yeah.
But it works out super well this way, and it makes, so there's two functions for it, and the other one is I think what Drew's showing us now, where you can you do this to build it so that way your grid is based on a multi-track drum.
Yeah, so what I'm doing now is, I'm just using tab to transient and that same keyboard shortcut, which is allowing me. And again, I don't have to do the whole song while we're sitting on here. And this is a full band. So the difference now is, and what I wanted to show was that you can do this with a full band. So I'm using tab to transient and option tab to map out my tempo. And I don't need to do the whole song, but you can see I get this all done up here. And then once I've done this, this allows me to do some other things. So for example, to tie it in with what Matt had done, I brought in, so let's listen to these drums. So I've got these drums, and it's not done to a click, so there's some variation and stuff. But now I want to incorporate some loops, right? So I bring in some maracas, right? I'm going to bring in this maraca sample, and let me put myself, I'm going to snap it to the grid. And so now when I move this sample to my newly created bar position, as you can see, it doesn't line up. So now we're going to use what Matt showed us earlier. I'm going to hold down Control. And I'm going to take this maraca part. Well, let's just hear it before, Obviously, not
Very
not
polyrhythmic.
not
I love.
yeah. It's a little, if you're, So I'm going to use, use our little shortcut, our Control, and confine it to that grid, to the grid, and then just duplicate it a few times. And now we have, still a little bit suspect on the feel, but of course, like as we had mentioned, you could come in here and refine things based on based on moving individual markers to get that feel right before you did any of the before you wind up doing any of the duplicating. So it would tie in with all that. So anyway, that's a quick demonstration on A, setting bar 1, and B, using the align bar or identify bar, or align bar rather, to build a tempo map. And then you have those two things that you can do to it. I can leave it alone, right? One, and let me just give you the let's do the full demo here of what if I wanted. So here's the whole band playing. Get rid of that guy. Get him out of there. So what I can do is, first of all, I want to put everybody, before I do this, I want to put everybody back on tempo. So I'm going to hold down Option, and now everybody's in tempo mode, so that when I make an adjustment here, oops, yes.
Don't you ever say you're
So-
wrong. Don't you ever.
So I mean, I'm literally.
Dude, I can't believe we just did that on the fly, by the way. I hope everyone at home, I hope you all just paid attention. What he just pressed play, moved the tempo around, everything tempo moved
20
around.
BPMs.
And there was no chop, there was no like it didn't sound bad. Like what?
ridiculous.
How do you
Yeah.
This is insane.
It's live music, live musicians, not cut to a click. I can tempo map them. I can conform to that click. I can change the tempo all in real time. It's insane. It's amazing.
That is pretty magical, man. And like, the fact that, so what we saw Drew do just there is like he's started building a tempo map. By grabbing all those tempo map points and pulling them up and down, it's keeping them all together and relative. So again, the number one thing here, it's the feel, it's the rhythm of the music. It's keeping that feel and connection between the different instruments locked in, while still having the chance to integrate loops or to be able to add MIDI instruments and have them locked in and quantized along to the audio. That sort of stuff, it's super, super cool, and it's a really powerful way to produce music.
And how good did it sound? How good did it sound? I mean, phase drums, multi-track drums, phase locked, everything. I mean, I could do it almost whatever I want. I took it up to 150 BPMs from 125. It's ridiculous.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, it's a great segue into the next point here, is talking about the different warp algorithms. So as you guys saw, we've kind of been talking around them, but I really wanted to make it super clear to everybody what each of these algorithms are and why you would pick one over the other. So here, I'll share my screen here. So you can see there's there's two places that you can select your warp algorithm. So the most common one is here in the track, where you see warp. And here is where you can select polyphonic, monophonic, varispeed, razor blade, and polyphonic. So I'll just quickly go over. The names are pretty self-explanatory, but let's just be clear here. So polyphonic is this is the default algorithm that every track kind of defaults to. This is just the best all-arounder. This works for vocals, pianos, guitars, drum. It literally will work on just about any material. It assumes that it has a complex amount of harmonics and musical stuff going into it. So it's there's a reason why it's the default. It's because it kind of works on almost everything. Monophonic typically works best when there is only one pitch. That's what monophonic means, a single pitch. So for singing, for monophonic synths, for basses, for things that are a little bit simpler harmonic structure. And as to why you would pick one over the other, typically my rule of thumb here is like I go with what sounds good. So if the polyphonic one, if I'm listening to it, I'm like, it sounds okay, but could it sound better? Am I hearing artifacts? Am I hearing things I don't like about the sound? That's typically what catches my ears. Like if I hear like a weird artifact or something that just isn't exactly what I want for it, that's when I go hunting for a different algorithm. And often on like bass, or I typically notice this on like a bass thing where you'll hear like the bass is sounding fine, and then all of a sudden you hear like a weird harmonic pitch shift thing on it. You're like, oh, what's that? Oh yeah, it might be my warp algorithm. And then just switching over to monophonic for me typically fixes that up. Varispeed, one of my absolute favorite algorithms, because this Varispeed, it's kind of a holdover name from back in the tape machine days, you could run a Studer tape machine. You could put it in Varispeed mode, which would, instead of running at exactly 15 inches per second, you could kind of goose it up or down. You could bring the pitch and the speed of the machine up and down. And this was a really cool trick back in the day to like double guitars. Like you'd record one guitar track at normal speed, and then you'd put the machine into Varispeed mode and go just a touch slower as you recorded it, and create this like just a touch of out of pitch between the left and the right guitar.
Yeah, a little natural chorus effect. Like
exactly, it sounds super super cool. And so Varispeed, as it's been brought into Luna here, allows you to it locks the pitch and the time together. So as you slow down the tempo of a clip using warping, its pitch also goes down along with it. And I'll show you what that sounds like here in a second, because it's my favorite sound for shifting around with, like, especially with drums. It has the other side effect, bonus side effect, I guess you could say, of it's kind of the least lossy sounding of all of them. Pitch and time are going together, so that it's not having to synthesize or do any crazy thing to like lock these two together. It's like, cool, tempo's going down, pitch is going down. They just kind of follow each other very naturally. So to me, it's one of the it's one of the sonically the best ones. Obviously, since the pitch is sliding around, you probably don't necessarily want to use this on like a keyboard part or vocals or bass. It's really great for drums, or if you're going to be very calculated about your tempo moves, you can use it on pitched instruments. But your mileage is going to vary there. Now, these last two are Luna-specific algorithms. Luna Razorblade, this one is insanely good at transient detection and the way it stretches and works with transients. So if you're doing drums, especially if you're doing multi-track drums, it keeps the phase locked together in a multi-track drum. It's really cool how this works, and we've shown this before when they debuted the kind of the multi-track warping stuff last year. The way it chops stuff together that preserves the transients sounds incredible in drums. So this has kind of been my number one go-to for drums. I guess the thing to know about it compared to some of the other ones is it has a certain range where it works really well. Like when you try to go over double the tempo or try to go half the tempo, that's where and Luna will tell you, it'll turn the clips red. It'll be like, hey, by the way, this is kind of out of my reach a little bit. I think it still plays back most of the time, even though it goes red. It'll still do its best, but it lets you know visually, like, hey, you're out of range of where this sounds good. Maybe think about a different algorithm, or live with it because it sounds cool. And I'll show you an example of that. And then Luna Polyphonic is our own brand of the polyphonic sort of stretching algorithm. Again, this comes down to like a personal taste of the sound between them, and it's going to be very subtle and nuanced. I'll play you guys an example here so you can hear it for yourselves. But this is another polyphonic one that seems to work really, really well for most instruments. So now that I've explained all of them, let me just I'll play you some quick examples of what these are doing. And this first one is my first track up here is a drum loop that I've warped with Varispeed. And so the tempo was originally 90 BPM. I brought it down to 80. So I've just lowered the tempo and it's lowered the pitch along with it. And you'll hear as I switch the warp algorithm around on it, what that does. So I'll go between, like, say, Varispeed and Razorblade this time around. So that's Varispeed. Now if I go to Razorblade, hear how the pitch came up? So
man, it almost fools your brain into thinking it sped up a little bit. Doesn't it? Was it just me, or did that feel it almost like it almost tricks your brain?
100%. Well, it's like pitch, because you associate that, right? You associate this is Razorblade. The tempo's not going to move, but by me going to Varispeed, everything's going to feel slower. Now here's Varispeed. Just a little softer.
Totally
It's such a cool mind trick. So I'll use this trick all the time, and this is a really great way for, like, if you really want to space out a bridge or kind of make something feel a little bit weird and heavy for a moment. Guys, sometimes you don't have to change the tempo of your song. Changing the pitch of your drums can give you that same effect, either bringing them down or bringing them up to add some hype. So those are that's Varispeed and Razorblade. Those two, the reason why I love those two for drums is the way they preserve the transients. Now check out if I switch this to polyphonic, the default algorithm, I'll switch back and forth between polyphonic and Razorblade. So the pitch will stay the same, but the way it treats the transient will be slightly different. And you guys should be able to hear, especially listen to like the snare drum, the kick drum, just the attack, the edge of those two sounds. So that's polyphonic. Here's Razorblade. Did you guys hear the difference on the snare drum there?
Snare drum, yeah, that more crack with Razorblade for sure.
Yeah, it feels a little more natural for sure.
Yeah, that's as intended. That's kind of Razorblade's MO, is like the way it preserves transients is really special and very, very useful. So that, and then of course, let me come down here to a melodic sample. So this one, this is a clip. I've already pitched it down, so it's in the same tempo, but I've pitched it down 3 semitones. We'll talk a little bit more about clip pitch here in a second, but so this is holding the tempo, but I've asked Luna to bring that down 3 semitones. And now let's see if you guys can hear a difference between polyphonic, monophonic, and the Luna polyphonic. Let's see if we can all hear a difference. I'd love to hear it from you guys in the chat. If you guys are hearing the difference between these algorithms and which one you like the best. All right. Who here didn't hear when I went to monophonic? This is an ear test. If you didn't hear when I went to monophonic, go see your doctor. Because here the monophonic tracks the pitch in a really interesting way with a complex sample like this. But between regular polyphonic and Luna polyphonic, Matt or Drew, did you guys hear much of a difference there?
Yeah, I don't think I did. No.
Yeah, it's hard to tell if I'm just tricking myself into it. Maybe a tiny difference, but they're pretty similar.
They're
And
super.
I was looking at the chat too.
They're
so.
they're super similar, and that's kind of the big point here. Is like, again, I talked about it at the beginning of like, how do I choose which warp algorithm? It's based on hearing something. So if I hear something's messed up, if I had this in monophonic mode, I'm pretty sure my ears would hear. I'd hear that and be like, dude, something's not right. What did I do?
Atonal.
Exactly. It's all sorts of mess up. And I look, oh crap, that's a polyphonic track on a monophonic algorithm. Whoops. But between polyphonic and Luna polyphonic, it's sometimes one will work better than the other. Sometimes you'll hear an artifact on one and you won't hear it on the others. You kind of got to pick and choose. And that's really, end of the day, like, use your ears to kind of judge these things. And then know that you have creative latitude to go between, say, something like Razorblade or Varispeed, to be able to make these manipulations. And the last thing I wanted to touch on before kind of talking about moving things around a little bit is, so far I've been making all these adjustments over here on a track level, and it's a great way to do it, but it's not the only way to do it. So right now my drum track is in Razorblade mode, but let's say for like this first time through the drum loop, I wanted it to be in Varispeed mode. I wanted to have that tempo difference happen. What I can do is I can double click on the header of the clip, and you see it brings up this clip edit window. And as part of that, I've got, I can mute the clip, I can change its clip gain, its clip pitch. Most importantly is I can change its warp type. So you can do this per clip, and you can say, you know what, for this one, I want to be in Varispeed. But then for my next clip, you can see it is still in. You guys can't see because it's hidden behind Matt. It's in Razorblade mode still.
We trust you, Ben.
Yeah, exactly. Trust. Here we go. I'll bring it up for real now. There you go. Now you guys can see this one's in Razorblade. This one's in Varispeed, and over here now, my track is telling me I have mixed warp modes. It is really cool that you can select this stuff. And again, a great use of this is if I've run into this multiple times with trying to time stretch a bass part. Everything sounds great in monophonic except for the moment that the bass player decides to play 2 notes at once, and all of a sudden they go,
or do a slide or something.
Yeah, do a slide, do something funky that doesn't work. And you're like, oh, dude, all right, this sounds great except for this one moment. Do I duplicate the track and blah blah blah? No. You don't have to do that. All you have to do, select the area that isn't working for you, splice it. And we're about to touch on how to splice stuff up and do this. Just create a new clip with just that track and say, you know what? No, just for this note, we're going to go monophonic or we're going to go polyphonic. You can change the mode on just one clip as needed. It's a great little trick there.
That's a testament really to Luna's like clip engine. I mean, like the team really like they really understood that like the clip is king, right? Each individual clip needs to be its own little thing. So each one has its own gain, its own pitch, its own a warp algorithm. It really says something about the forethought they put into it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So then let's see what's next on the outline here. Changing the rhythm. So Matt kind of showed you this originally when he was messing around with the warp algorithms. Guys, you can think creatively about this stuff, right? Like so far we've shown a lot of functional things, but now we're going to kind of get into like the sound designy creative side of things, which is like using warps, using these things. This is a great way to like take a drum loop that sounds one way and then totally mess with its rhythm. And even sometimes we've talked about like avoiding artifacts so far. Honestly, sometimes it sounds really cool to leave in artifacts, like to use those to your advantage, especially for like electronic music or like lo-fi hip hop, like stuff where actually having these things that you may initially be like, oh, what something's wrong there. Like the wrong can be right, like. So I guess Matt, let's talk about chopping, man. Like chopping up samples. There's some really awesome kind of keyboard shortcuts, some like quick workflows here around being able to quickly chop samples, manipulate them, and do what you want.
Yeah, for sure. And before we kind of get into chopping, I want to show off some cool thing that's pretty specific to Luna that is very unique. So I'm going to drag in some just piano chords here to kind of create a little chord progression. All right, there we go. So yeah, now I got a little chord progression going on. I'm going to duplicate it here. And since I moved this kick when I was demoing earlier, I'm going to line up this chord with this moved kick. So you see when I move that clip, this other little bit back here pops up. And if I do the same thing, I move it back. Luna still remembers. Luna has this system where even though you're layering clips on top of each other, and in most DAWs, the clip on top will take place of the clip on bottom. It'll erase what's underneath. Luna actually has this system where it remembers what clips are on bottom and what clips are on top, which is awesome when you're kind of arranging one-shots like this. Because I can move things, and whatever is underneath is still there. It doesn't actually get erased. So when I take this clip away, or move it away rather, whatever's underneath is still there, which is awesome. I mean, I haven't seen that in any other DAW. You can actually right click and do bring to front or send it back. It has this whole, it's almost like Photoshop layers.
A layered editor. Yeah, it's like a layered editing. Yeah.
This is it's caught me before in other DAWs where it did layered editing, but it would play both layers and not necessarily what you see is what you heard. So I've been bitten by this in the past in other DAWs, but I love you're right, the way that Luna does it. What you see is what you hear, but it remembers the things that are behind it for when you do edits like what Matt was just showing.
Yeah, so super good for like duplicating things and making slight variations. You don't have to then go find the original sample to get that little part that you chopped off. It's still under there, and when you move the clip, you'll still recall it. So nice. It's a cool little trick. So yeah, as far as chopping, let me drag in this little synth harp here. I'm just going to time stretch it real quick to get it on grid.
I'm seeing a bunch of questions coming in around clip pitch stuff. We'll right after Matt walks us through all these chopping stuff, we'll dive a little bit more into clip pitch because I got some tricks for you guys that I think will answer a bunch of these questions I'm seeing.
Right on. So yeah, as far as chopping, the B key is your best friend for chopping up samples.
Yep.
So there's a couple different ways to use it. One way would just be place the playhead somewhere in the clip, hit the B key, and that's basically the separate command. So it'll split the clip at wherever the playhead is. Another way to use it is if you highlight a little section here and then use the B key, it'll do the same thing, just clip out just that section. So I find this cool for, say I want to change the time of this. You can just highlight a little section here, hit the B key. Now I have this separate little clip that I can move around somewhere else. And same thing, I can hit the B key here, rearrange things here. So yeah, it's super useful just for creating smaller clips that you can then rearrange in different ways. And of course, you can do Command E as well. But
I was just about to say, if you're coming from another DAW that happens to use Command E, both shortcuts work for the same thing.
Yeah, and I think Command E is the Ableton command. So I was using that at first because I'm an Ableton guy, but once I got the hang of the B key, it's so much easier. Just one key, you're split, you're good to go. It makes it a little bit quicker, especially when you're doing a lot of these chops. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the basic of how you would chop things. And then, of course, if you're doing like where I showed where you can select a little section and hit the B key. The selection obviously follows the snap grid value. So say I wanted to select a little bit smaller section here, I can increase my grid value by doing Shift plus. I can decrease it by doing Shift minus, and then I have more resolution to grab just a smaller little chunk of the clip and clip it out just like it was doing before. So yeah, definitely the grid size in combination with the B key and highlighting or placing the playhead, that's the best way to navigate through here and clip, chop what you want.
Nice. Seeing it, quick question here. They're wondering about going from, if you wanted to show, so if you're looking at the clip view like this, is there a shortcut to get to seeing the warps?
You can do the minus key, but I think it just cycles
command control left right arrow.
Yeah, command control, I think left arrow.
Yeah. That togs you through the primary track functions.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. That's
control right arrow that'll get you to clip or to warps if you're on the clips view. So yeah, that's a good one.
Nice.
Oh yeah. So that's what No wanted to know. Yeah. No wanted to know.
No. No.
Twister.
No. No now knows what No did not previously know.
Love it.
Yep.
Nice.
So yeah, the other thing I do a lot when I'm chopping things up is like Command D duplicate to do like little stutters. So I'm gonna increase my grid size to 16 again. So for example, I can highlight a little area here. If I do Command D, it'll automatically just duplicate that section and push it forward.
Nice.
Another trick I use all the time is if you do, say I do like 3 little stutters in a row, you can like right click and do reverse on the middle one. Adds a little bit of variation. Instead of just having it, trigger the same exact sound 3 times, it has a little bit of shift in there. So yeah, those are definitely useful tricks when you're chopping things up.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that's that's the basics of my chopping workflow. Is pretty much just going in here, bending on the grid size, chopping things up, moving things around, a lot of trial and error to figure out what sounds good.
And I guess Matt, were you like create a new, were you like duplicate the track version so that if you go off on a tangent and you always want to get back to your original, you can? Is that something you do typically?
Yeah, it depends on what's going on. If I want to if I want to remember what the original timing of the sample is and I want to make variations based off it, but not stray too far from it, I usually will duplicate it so I have a clean version I can get back to. A lot of times I just off-road and just start experimenting and see what sounds good, because when I'm chopping up like this, I don't necessarily have like a particular thing in mind that I'm going for. I just want to kind of play around with different orders
fun
to play the clips in. Yeah, exactly. So
Gotcha. That's always been one of my favorite things around, like taking like multiple different tracks or different, take like 3 or 4 different loops, chopping them up, taking like a little, just like a stab of one thing, and then glitch a little bit of it here, go down to another track, using this to kind of really make a interesting like rhythmic and melodic piece out of multiple sample tracks. It really comes down to like listening to it over and over again, right? Like kind of almost building it up a beat at a time or a bar at a time and be like, all right, horn, synth, reverse this thing into, all right, cool. Now I got my first measure. You kind of work your way through the loop piece by piece.
Yeah, I totally just do it like kind of bar by bar. Drives my girlfriend crazy to hear the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. This is one that's best done on headphones if you're with other people, or let the artist go out for a lunch break while you sit there and splice and sample around and do all the fun stuff.
Yeah. To Drew's point though, if you did want to create like a clean version, if you open up the versions menu over here, this little button is the duplicate version button. So that'll just duplicate it. Now I have a clean version on V2 and I can come in here and start chopping up V3. So yeah, if you want to preserve something so you can get back to it later, that's the best way to do it.
Nice. That's awesome. And then in terms of like fades, when you're doing chop stuff like this, Matt, do you typically do you go back in and like crossfade stuff at all? Do you fade in, fade out? Like how do you deal with clicks and pops when you're doing stuff like this?
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of on a case-by-case basis depending on what the sample material is and what's going on in it. But yeah, I'll just kind of listen through it, and if there is anything where it's like a sharp cut between clips, definitely come in and add fades. For example, like this piano clip that I chopped up here, it's a much longer one shot, so where I chopped it is kind of like in the middle of the sustain. So I might want to come in here and add a little bit fade to make it sound a little bit more natural, have a little bit more of a fade out like these other 2 clips do. Which you can do just by hovering over the clip at the very end, at the top of it, you'll get this little fade tool pop up with your cursor, and then you can grab that and drag it. And it's based on the grid value when you have snap on, but of course you can always hold down command and off-road if you want to place it in between the grid lines without having to change the grid value.
Nice. And then is there a shortcut? So you had those 3 different piano clips there. Is there a quick way to do that same fade across all those clips?
Yeah, I mean, you can do the auto fades, which if you select everything and then hit F, it'll automatically add fades at the beginning and the end, which is good if you got, pretty much a lot of really, really chopped up material and everything's kind of clicking and popping. Just highlighting everything, hitting F, that'll kind of add these small fades that'll kind of take the edge off the beginning and the ends of the clip. I think we showed this last time, but in the settings window on the options tab, you can set the fade length here. So I have mine set to 50, which is pretty short. You can even do, super tiny little micro fades if you wanted to just take the very start of the clip off.
Well, you can,
whatever you set here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Matt, you can select if you select those 3 and do the fade to 1, it'll do to all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like selection grouping. So if you were to do the end fade again, it'll
fade all of them.
Yeah, you can drag as well, right?
Yeah.
And then once you place the fades, you also see there's this little dot in the middle of the fade, and you can use that to kind of change the shape of the fade. So if I want to drop out a little bit quicker or sustain a little bit longer, then drop out at the very end, you can kind of dial that in with that control.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, because this is one of the things I like. Matt, I love the way you approach it. Like, you do it by listening to it, right? Like, because sometimes it clicks and pops. As much as a lot of us OCD engineers really love to get rid of every click and pop, sometimes it's sort of the sound. It's kind of the vibe of the thing. Like, having those little mistakes. Again, wrong can be right. Like, it can actually be part of why a thing sounds the way it sounds. And sometimes fixing those up takes away from the vibe. So I've always been shocked when I've heard other multi-tracks, especially like famous multi-tracks, the amount of like edit, like clicks and pops that are left in final things that you just never notice when you listen to it as a fan, and then you hear it like exposed. You're like, oh my god, there was just clicks and pops all over that thing, and
or bad punches. Bad punches too.
My gosh, yeah, right.
Yeah,
and you're just like,
especially with like sample based hip hop, like old like Jay Dilla kind of stuff. It's like the sound of that like abrupt cut is like part of the sound. You know what I mean? Sometimes that's what you want.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nice. So this brings us into talking about clip pitch. I know a couple of people, you guys were asking about like, can you automate clip pitch? You can't automate it the way that you would think to automate it, but there is kind of a cool workaround here. And just, speaking more broadly around clip pitch, if you guys are, at the top, we're recommending places like Splice. I know someone shouted out TrackLibs, which is also a great resource for being able to get samples that aren't illegal. But one thing that you'll notice a lot, if any of you guys have uploaded music using Splice clips, is like, since everybody has access to Splice clips, you may run into a thing where the content ID system or the copyright police are like, hey, it sounds like you sampled someone's song. It just so happened that you both used the same sample. Number one piece of advice I can give is manipulate the samples. Don't just copy them, bring them into your session, change the tempo, change the key, add some filter, get weird with it. It's a great impetus for getting strange with your clips, guys, because you're less likely to get called out for like, hey, you used the same sample as somebody else's song. But for you guys, kind of looking into being able to automate pitch, clip pitch, my number one recommendation is kind of take what Matt just showed us of, say I wanted to change this second chord of my sample here. I would hit the B key to separate it, and then I would say, instead of -3, I want to do -5. I have no clue if this is going to sound musically good, but you guys will at least hear it. It's a bit of a workaround. It would work for voice, it would work for bass, it would work for any of these instruments. But you basically just separate the clip where you want the pitch to change, and then change the clip pitch for that clip. Let's see how bad this sounds. It's the third chord.
Oh, nice. I like it, Ben.
It's actually not terrible.
Key change.
Yeah, I like it.
I love how it comes. I like how it comes back. All right, you know what?
Yeah. That's a win.
for moving something down a whole step, that actually worked out. But essentially, this is one of my favorite things to do. It changes the key, changes the vibe. And then as you guys are also probably hearing on this track, I've gone in here, I've added some EQ, I've added the event tide for a little bit of chorusing. There's delay and reverb on it. Like I've kind of I've taken the sample from being a stock thing to being something that sounds a little bit more unique, and not easily the algorithms are not going to pick up that this is exactly the same sample as somebody else's track using this sample. So that changing the key is one thing, but another thing I love to do, and I think I did it here. I did this on a different track because I wanted a fully different sound to it, but so I've taken this one down 3, and as you guys can see, I duplicated my track, changed the effects on it, but then most importantly, I've gone up 9 steps. So this is essentially, I've shown this in a couple of mix sessions before, but this is one of my favorite things to do for bridges, for choruses, for anything where you're like, man, this needs I need the energy to change here. Using clip pitch and pushing something up an octave or down an octave it's an unbelievable amount of fun. So here, let me play what it sounds like for you, transitioning from the octave down to the octave up. Come on, right?
Instant bridge. Yeah.
Instant bridge. I didn't even have to try that very hard. Man, I could listen to that little dream moment forever. But dude, yeah, octave jumps, man. It's such a cool way to differentiate between two different parts: verse to chorus, chorus to a bridge. It's a great way to do it. And of course, I saw someone asking earlier about 808s, tuning 808s. I would do same sort of thing, bring in an 808 sample and then use clip pitch to kind of to really get it in there. And let me see, actually, I can do this for you guys real quick. A cool way to do this is to let's see, 808. Let me find just 808 kit.
And by the way, while you're doing that, Ben, that workaround works great for clip gain as well. Just if you need just one word to be softer or louder, just select it, hit the B key, then you've got its own clip. And since you haven't manipulated the edges, it will just play fine as long as you've not sliced it on the waveform itself. You can now do what you want. Yeah.
Yeah, so here I just brought in, you guys saw it in real time, I just brought in a 808 sample from Splice. It says it's an A. I kind of believe it, but I don't 100% trust it. One of the number one tricks that I've always used for finding the pitch of low frequency stuff like 808s, sometimes it can be really hard to hear exactly what pitch it's on. Best trick in the book, just start by jumping it up an octave. So now that's a lot easier to hear the fundamental dong. This one's a pretty clear sample, so it's kind of easy to hear. I've had ones that are super distorted or kind of nondescript, where it can be really hard to hear the pitch. So what I would do is I'd bring this up an octave to start. So I go. What are the odds that it's right in the key of my song? So perfect. I nailed the first chord. Now I'm going to move on to the second one. That is not the right pitch. This one, I think, is a step up. Perfect. And then this one, this can be kind of a fun process. Oops, I went down yet again. It's kind of cool. So what I would go,
the 5-string bass players just showed up.
Exactly, right? And then once I had these tuned, I'm an octave above where I want to be. So I would just bring this down, subtract 12 semitones, an octave essentially from these two. Bring that back down to 0. And now I've got 808s tuned to the first 3 chords. That's you can do it that fast, guys. It's really cool. And if you haven't heard that octave up trick before, highly recommend it. It's a really fast, easy way to find the pitch of something that's a little bit harder to hear and when it's super, super low.
Yeah, here all these years I've been just putting it in Melodyne or just hit throw auto tune on it and hit analyze. Oh, okay, there's the note.
I do that a fair amount as well.
Yeah.
That's a quick way, especially something like this. If you don't quite know your what key you're in or what the fundamental of it, throwing it into like Melodyne and letting it analyze it and tell you what the notes are. That's a quick little hack way to find the pitch
Yeah.
of a clip.
That's my hacky way too.
I love it.
Yeah,
Nice.
that trick you just showed works really good for kick drums too. If you're the kind of person that sequences drums by using one shots, like just layered in the track, like lowering the every other kick or something by like one semitone or whatever is like a
Yes.
really good way to add variation.
Yeah, using one shot. Yeah, taking your snare up and down, like putting the two up a semitone, the four
Yep.
like down a semitone, so you get like a cat. Like you can get little rhythmic or pitch differentiations on the same rhythmic thing. Is huge.
Yeah, it's not even something you like necessarily perceive as like a pitch difference. It just feels like a more natural performance than just samples triggering the same thing every single time.
Yep. And so, Victor, I know the thing you're looking for is you want the pitch to be able to kind of move fluidly between the notes, which automation would, if you could draw lines of this clip pitch, of course, you would be able to do that. Luna doesn't do that yet, but hit the feedback button. And if you guys are in agreement with Victor, if everyone hits the feedback button saying we want clip pitch to be automatable on a line, you never know. You never know, guys. I mean, you do know
speed it up.
because you do know they actually do listen to your guys' feedback, and the more support we get for that, the more likely it will be that it happens.
Yeah, please submit that one because I want it to.
Exactly. This is basically the lobbying hour for which features we want to see. But speaking of user feedback actually resulting in features, God,
Yeah, right.
nailing it with
What
these
a
segues
segue.
today. Reversing clips. This was a very early one. There was a ton of
Yeah.
feedback. I think this was like second or third update of Luna. We got this
Yeah,
added
it was
in.
surprising. It was surprising how many people like needed this right out of the gate, and luckily, the team saw that, and it was a fairly easy one. Yeah, so I've got a quick little demo for this that's a little bit more, in my world, working with bands and stuff. Like I figured I would do the feature is of course reverse clips, which is something that as Ben mentioned in the right click menu. Actually, Matt just showed it a minute ago talking about the layered editing style that Luna has. So in the right click menu on a given clip, you have the ability, you have this sub menu here that we can adjust with bringing to front, send to back. You can reset warps, you can consolidate or render in place, which is actually also a good command for some of the things that we've done today, where you get things exactly as you want them, and you might want to consolidate it in place, maybe after you've duplicated the track version as well. But the thing, what I want to talk about today is reverse. It's one of the ones we added earlier into an early version. And one of the things I use this for, of course, you can simply just come in and make a selection, separate something out, and then hit reverse and reverse the clip. But I thought I would show how to make reverse reverb.
Yes.
Which is a fun little effect here. And the way I chose to do it, or the way I did it in this case was I went ahead and I had a lead vocal here. And it had a reverb on it, this vocal reverb. And what I did was, and I even if I only think I'm going to use reverse reverb in one spot, I always just do the whole song because, I didn't in this case, but I always do because you never know when you might want to bring it back later on, and then you don't want to have to redo it.
Yeah, it's kind of
Anyway.
nice just having a whole track of like, here's all the reverse reverb moments I could use, and then you use it in a
Exactly.
few spots.
Exactly. So I'm not going to bother doing this part of it in real time because it's boring. But I solo the track, I put the reverb in pre-fader, and then I just mute the track that it is, and then I'm just going to do a bounce down, right? So that's what I did. I bounced the entire track, and by soloing the vocal, it cuts everything else. But since it's pre-fader, I don't cut the feed to the vocal reverb, and in this case, I muted the delay as well.
Gotcha.
So this gets me pre-fader reverb, so in other words, no dry signal, and then Luna bounces that, and it presents me with this in the dialog box, in the exported files area. It shows me the finished thing, and then I can just drag it back in, right back at the playhead.
This is going in forwards mode right now. So the reverb's based off of the forward vocal, or is it?
Yeah. The
Okay.
reverb. Now I've already done the reverse, but let's just pretend I haven't. I can just come over here and so this is what it actually came out. It comes out looking like. All right, now I can't remember what I did. Yeah, that's the forward. That's the forward reverb, and then what you want to do is then you reverse it, and then you kind of what I like to do is I like to just play around with where this is going to be, because I'll often do an extra long reverb so that I can get the most of that reverse tail inside of there, and then so let me just let me solo these guys up and see what we have.
Don't you ever
So now we have that distinctive sort of sucking up sound that we have of that sucking into the reverb, and then you can kind of play around with the sort of pre-delay or the delay prior to the dry sound coming in and getting that kind of reverse effect that we all like.
Well, and one of my favorite things to do there is to chop it, right? So like you hear, and then
Yeah.
once you start singing, you cut the reverse, and like this is
Yeah.
again where it's it's really handy having this as printed audio inside your session, because now you can just you can just chop and do exactly that. So you get a
put it
moment
on-
kind of coming into it, and then now it snaps away right when he starts
Yeah.
actually singing.
Yeah, so I can come over here and do whatever, all of that stuttery stuff that that we like to do. There's plugins that do this, but I kind of like I like doing it myself. It just feels a little bit more. It gives me more control.
Let's
But
see
yeah,
what that
so
sounds. Let's
that's,
see what
you know-
that sounds like. I'm curious what the edit feels like.
Yes. Let
don't
me solo them up so we can hear that coming in.
you ever
I guess I
Yeah.
didn't really time it out right, but that's kind of cool, right?
don't you ever
Yeah, that could be an
That's rad.
interesting.
don't you ever
That's
yeah,
cool, man.
I'm sure.
I love
I'm
that.
sure a blues. I don't know if a blues guitar player would dig it, but you never know. You never know.
You never know. Maybe
Oh,
for the
some
bridge.
fusion here.
Yeah, maybe for the bridge. So yes, so that's a real simple trick for doing reverse reverb, using reverse clip and how to make it happen. And
Nice, and that's Tuver's asking if there's a keyboard shortcut for it. There's not a keyboard shortcut. You just got to click on the clip and then right click to select reverse.
yeah, it's
That's
in the
how you-
right click menu. Yep.
Yep. Nice. So that's reversing. That's how to make reverse reverbs. So now I guess want to get to the deep dive here as quick as we can. So the last couple of things we
Yeah.
wanted to talk about for samples was some other cool ways to mess with samples. So we talked about pitch, reversing, chopping, fading, duplicating, having lots of fun there. But I'd love to hear from you guys in the chat as well. What are some of your guys' favorite ways to mess with samples, to make them unrecognizable, to make sure the Content ID system doesn't pick them up? I'd love to hear from you guys in the chat what some of your favorite tricks are for that, while Matt and I kind of talk about some of ours. So I'll go first, Matt. Because one of my favorite ones is, and I literally did a whole 5-minute tip video about how much I love this one. I think we talked about it last week on the 100 tips, maybe more than once. Man, the Moog multi-filter, especially the XL version of it, you have 2 LFOs, but most importantly, you also have a step sequencer. And I think we literally showed this last week in the 100 tips, so I'm not going to spend too long on it.
And your video, you definitely check out Ben's video on this. It's a great one. It's
Man,
great.
it is such a cool effect, because here, let me play. I'll do a little before and after for you guys. Here's the after. And then this is without the filter.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it gives it a nice rhythm.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
gave it my own rhythm that it didn't have originally. And of course, I'm following that up with a little bit of Brigade chorus as well, just to add a little stereo fun. So it got Moog filter. This one, to me, one of the funnest ones to get in and play with and mess stuff up. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, one thing I use a lot, especially for like drum stuff, is just different delays. Like precision delay is really good if you just want something clean with maybe a little bit of modulation. But let me solo up these hi-hats and kick and snare. So yeah, right now with no delay on it, I just got a very straight, quarter note hi-hats. So let's say I wanted to kind of change up the hi-hat rhythm. I can add precision delay here. I got it set to 16th notes, and all of a sudden I have this 16th note hi-hat rhythm.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's like
Ooh.
instantly changes the sound. I mean, obviously you can mess around with the time. You can do triplet rhythms and dotted eighth note rhythms and that kind of thing. And especially with the precision delay, I like the mod section it's got here, which is like a little bit of chorus action happening. It just adds. It basically makes it so each hi hat kind of hits a little bit different. So it's adding more variation there. And then Ben showed this trick with the SDD last time, but if you set up your delay to be, like I have a 16th note right now, you can take it out of sync and it'll maintain the millisecond value. So 150 milliseconds equals 16th notes in this particular BPM. But then I can come in here and start to tweak these a little bit. So for example, I can push them back a little bit and get kind of a swung 16th note rhythm. Yeah,
Dude, that
lots
worked
of different possibilities.
It made
from just
such a different
single-
feel right away. I love it.
Yeah, you get all these different possibilities just from a simple, quarter note hi-hat loop. You can really make all different kinds of patterns out of it, which is really cool.
Hell yeah.
And of course, you can automate the delay time and get crazy that way. But yeah, it's a really cool trick.
That's super cool. How about you, Drew? What's I know you've got. You were saying that using like Culture Vulture distortion, kind of gritting stuff up. What got any tricks around those?
Yeah, well, I mean, nothing. I don't have a specific demo set up. I'm getting ready for the Century one, but yeah, but I definitely encourage people to Culture Vulture for me. Well, and actually, it's funny. I think I probably am using it in this session. This is not exactly. I'm not really messing it up, but like you'll notice, this might look weird to some people, but drum overheads. Believe it or not, like I use Culture Vulture on almost every set of drum overheads, and it just has this thing. It just like adds solidity to things. It's relatively mild. I'm up here, and then I always level compensate for it, and that allowing me to just sort of toggle back and forth. And it's a super subtle thing, but like for me, it just adds like heft to overheads and really kind of locks the kit in. I like to use the overhead. I like to build drum kits around the overheads primarily. So for me, the overheads are super duper important. As you can see here, I've got quite a few plugins on these drum overheads, like to really sort of shape them into what I want. And then I almost use like the close mics to just kind of fill in a little bit, So Culture Vulture is really good for that. Another one that I like that I use in that case a lot also is the VSM. This guy, this one can be deadly, it can be lethal, but it can also be really subtle and nice. And the cool thing I like about this is the big thing about this that's really great is the MS mode. I do a lot of it in mid-side mode, where it has a second harmonic distortion generator and a third harmonic. And this one's a FET, so it's kind of like a different type of distortion. Whereas this is a Zener blender, which is a diode type distortion. So you've got like transistor and diode, different types of distortion that you can then assign. And we'll definitely do a deep dive on this one. This one's definitely worthy of a deep dive. But
Definitely.
Yeah. So because there's obviously a lot going on here, but I definitely encourage people to check this one out. I love it. This is something, believe it or not, you can use on entire mixes, drum overheads, if you're just super careful about what you do. But it can also be, a sledgehammer. So that's definitely one that I recommend for sure. Those two
awesome.
are my Culture Vulture.
Nice. And definitely shout out to the Auto Biscuit. I know that's Monty. We had a good chat about this one going in, I think, to the 101 episode or the 100th episode, how much he loves the biscuit. The biscuit, which is if you guys haven't checked that one out, it's like a bit crusher delay filter. It's got some step stuff in it. It's a super cool plugin for getting nuts with samples. I'm also a huge fan of the Galaxy Tape Echo, and I guess the last thing I wanted to give a quick shout out to is it's actually it's one of the new ones to the UAD, which it's the Vision Channel Strip. So I've been using the crap out of this for, especially on samples, the high pass and low pass filters. Like oftentimes I find myself just using it. Again, I love that it doesn't use any DSP. It's a native process. I'll just kick in the sweep filters. You can see like here on this is like a little drum sample or drum loop. Kicking that high pass filter up to cut all of the bass out of it, using the low pass to maybe tame the top end of a sample, make it a little bit more lo-fi. I've been using the crap out of these filters ever since we released it, and kind of putting on almost every track in some way or shape. If not for that, using it for the EQ again, just having like the fact that now like my go-to built-in EQ whenever I'm messing with tracks, especially if I'm on my laptop but not on my big system, is the Vision channel strip is kind of on everything now to do these simple manipulations. So big shout out to that one if you guys are rocking it in Luna. So yeah, guys, that's sample-based music. That's using loops, one-shots, tempo mapping, warp algorithms. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of different things, but hopefully this is getting you guys inspired to mess around with your samples and continue to like push the limits of what you can do with samples, because there's really no end to like how cool of a sound you can get out of samples, and kind of sound designing with them, being intentional about how you treat your loops, how you treat your samples. It can be a major kind of way to up your productions, up your mixes. This kind of, even if you're not a producer per se, this isn't something you do all the time, I've talked about in plenty of mixing episodes of how much of this like clip pitch stuff or sound design elements bring a lot of what I've used in production over into mixing to, you know, give clients give them something special and something different, be able to create moments inside of a production or inside of a mix where like all of a sudden we get to the first chorus, the bass drops out, the reverse reverb kicks in, and then man, the reaction that you get from artists and from clients when you give them that sort of creative moment and you give the song just that little extra touch makes a world of difference. People, they really stand up and notice when that sort of stuff happens. So highly recommend taking some of these tips, applying them to what you're doing. And with that, let's sorry, I wanted to real quick shout out some of the other people, some of their favorite tips in here as well. VSM, Danielle says VSM is very different, dangerous but worth the risk. I agree. Isotope Trash, yep, Trash is really a cool one. On Boys Homicide, you guys are really picking up a lot of these like cool colored ones. Shout out to RC20, that's a really cool effect by another company as well. Back in the day, I used to use Steinberg Recycle a lot for samples. Yep. Hands up if you remember using Recycle to make Rex loops.
Oh, yeah.
I think we've all been there. And luckily, it's a little less important these days. Distortion, fuzz, EQ filtering, Moog filter, pitch, tempo, bit rate changes, going out through external gear. Yep. Screwing up with the DINR doesn't work unless you have a 30-year-old Mac. Yep. So yeah, there's some cool ways to get lo-fi and different samples. Rock on. All right, cool. So guys, that's sample-based stuff. Let's jump over to Century Tube Channel Strip. And Drew, this is the final one in the series. This I believe is actually the most affordable of all the channel strips on the platform. Like this is, and it's still it's power packed. There's so much cool stuff inside of this little tiny nondescript gray box. Does do a lot. So let's dive in. What do you got for us?
Yeah. So, well, first thing you'll notice is, hopefully, am I loud enough? You hear me okay?
Yep.
You'll notice. Let me just get my cue up a little bit.
You switched mics.
Yeah.
On us.
Yeah. I switched mics while you guys are doing that stuff. I thought we'd try something a little bit different this time with doing a deep dive here with these channel strips, just for the heck of it. So I switched over to an SM7B here, and I've got it plugged into an Apollo. And you'll see that right now I've got, we're just going into this is bypass, the Century's bypass. So you're just hearing the raw Apollo preamp with the SM7. And I thought maybe we would do a little bit of, I would just talk through the mic as we're doing the deep dive. So
nice.
Yeah. So like maybe if we just sort of cut to the chase, I'm going to go ahead and click it on, and then we can hear what I did to get it to this. So, right now you're hearing a pretty basic, clean SM7 sound straight into an Apollo, which is great if you want to track it and be able to mess with it later. But the goal here is to give us an idea of where we can take that sound and what we can do with it. So by putting on the Century channel strip with some basic settings that we'll walk through, you can see right away that we've kind of transformed this mic, right? I mean, hopefully everybody, hopefully it's making it through the YouTube algorithm and all that stuff, and everybody's able to hear this. But all of a sudden, we've taken it from this sort of generic, basic mic sound and given it some polish and given it some sheen and so forth. So
Absolutely.
let's walk through the GUI like we normally do. And left to right, the Century channel strip has a preamp section. It has an EQ section. It has a compression or opto leveler section, and then the final output. One of the most important things that you'll want to, it's a tube-based preamp. So it has, it's got some coloration. It has some, and how hard you hit it has a huge impact on the way it sounds. So we've got two different overload indicators here, and don't be afraid for these to flicker a little bit, right? This is one thing I know, Ben, a lot of people have seen your Sentry video on this, and there's a lot of comments of people who are like, oh, well, gosh, shouldn't it not be overloading? Shouldn't we not see that? It's amazing how many, like, that scares people. But in this case, these are really signal indicators that just kind of let you know where you are in the model and where you are, dynamically speaking.
So you don't necessarily lose information. Like if you see the red light, it's not like you clipped and you've lost information. No, you've just, you've clipped the tube preamp. So you're now pushing the tubes you're going to hear some breakup. Like you'll hear a little something to it. But it's not like digital distortion. It's accurate to the model of what it would sound like, kind of distorting. It's a very pleasant distortion a lot of times on these.
I have I'll show. I have this also loaded on the vocal in this song. So if we have time, I might switch over to that at some point after we do the walkthrough, and you'll see. And in the track, the overload light is flickering, but the vocal sounds super sweet and hi-fi, and so it's not a bad thing. So if we start over here, the first decision you need to make is whether to use high gain or low gain. This is, this is primarily about the mic type. So obviously I'm using an SM7 here, so I definitely want to be, on the high gain side. SM7s are notorious for needing a lot of gain. Yep. So are ribbon mics. That's another one where you probably want to be on the high gain. Mm-hmm. But again, you can also, even a mic that might work on the low gain, you might choose to do it on the high gain, just to drive it harder. So this gain setting is into the tube model. So that's first and foremost. And then underneath of it, you have your basics. You have a mic line switch. I'll have to be careful this time since I'm actually talking through it, about not doing certain things, because the mic line switch on this one is
physical.
It's physical. It'll change. It'll kill me it'll kill my signal if I change it. So, but of course, the beauty of that is that a lot of people think, oh, well, I only should use Unison on mic inputs or on high Z inputs, but everyone should know that Unison does apply to line inputs. It still does work. Now, of course, there's not the impedance matching that's needed for a microphone, but it does take care of gain staging and, of course, the coloration. So if you bring a line level signal into an Apollo, go ahead and use a Unison preamp, switch it over to line input, and your line input, the gain amp there, will take on the characteristics and gain staging of the device. So don't sleep on that. Yep. We got a nice high pass filter, which of course in this case I probably do want to do that, right? It's an 80 hertz high pass, so I have that turned on just to kind of get rid of some of the proximity effect. As you'll see, I also have a little bit of 110 boosted here to kind of compensate. So I'm kind of, pretty standard thing you might do to a vocal or to a voice to kind of shift the low end up a little more into the chesty region and less in the sort of boomy region. We have our pad, phase polarity or phase reversal, and then the pad, which again, I don't want to mess with right now because, but it'll mess with the sound. But, so for example, I said earlier, you might choose the high gain input. So like high gain with the pad on versus just the low gain on, like you can play around with it and figure out and tweak with just how much you're going to hit the model. And then lastly, down here, we have this level control here is kind of like, it's kind of like the 610 where it's the outside of it's the output of the model, right? So this is happening and this is sort of the output stage, and we'll add saturation and coloration. So there's a lot of variability here that you can play around with. I don't know, Ben, if you have more to say on how some ways you use it.
Yeah, well, I mean, number one thing to keep in mind is even seeing like Prince is asking here about how to keep it clean, how to use this best. And so you got two options, right? Either you want to kind of crunch something up, you want to give it a little saturation, a little something, or say you want to go as clean as possible. My number one tip for going as clean as possible is before you do anything, you go to the output knob on the right hand side and turn that up 12 dB. That is clean digital gain. This is that's basically giving you 12 dB of headroom that's fully clean that you can't saturate. So by doing that, you now are lowering the amount of gain that you have to do on the left-hand side. And this kind of showed this trick a little bit last week, talking about the Fender Tweed 55 amp, Same sort of trick. Like if you're finding that it's always a little crunchier than you want, number one thing to first start with is by turning up knowing where your clean gain stages are inside these plugins, which on the Sentry is that right hand output knob. So if you crank that up 6, 10, 12 dB, now all of a sudden you need less tube preamps. So you may be able to, put it in the low mode and have the level at a very reasonable level, and you'll never see those lights come on. So that's if you're going for a super clean thing. If you're going for a not super clean thing, do the exact opposite. Maybe even trim the output down a few dB. So now you're forced to drive
the
the preamp a little bit harder. Exactly.
Yeah, now I'm driving that harder and less output gain. So, which of course consequently has me spanking this compressor a bit more too. So, yeah.
Because all these things are interdependent, and it helps to have an idea in your mind of what tone you want, and kind of start from the back and move forwards, gain stage wise. Which is, again, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it really, knowing how these gain stages sound and what they have to offer. That's why you have in Sentry specifically, you have 3 different spots that you can choose your gain, and they all affect the sound slightly differently.
Yeah, for sure. All right, cool. So yeah, so that's the input side. That's some great tips on doing that. I remember Matt also did that on his Unison deep dive. That was where he did that with the 1073. Opened up that digital gain, and then you really can hear sort of what the model's doing. So that's a great tip there. Okay, so that's the preamp. So then next up is the EQ, and in this particular case, I was going from this generic sort of boxy, typical flat sound. Part of the equation here was getting rid of some of those mids. So
dude, that's my favorite part of the Sentry EQ is the variable midband to do exactly what you did. I love Drew. You did exactly what I would have done if I was EQing your voice. I was like, there's that kind of nasally thing, right? That the SM7's got. You can, of course, if you guys are having trouble hearing this sort of stuff, you can boost it. So boost that frequency, boost the gain on it, and then hunt around until you find what annoys you, and then scoop it out.
Yeah, well, and Ben, that's a great tip. And there's a little bit more to that story, because this band is a proportional EQ, which means the more there's 2 different types of EQ bands. You have proportional or constant Q. Constant Q means the bandwidth stays the same regardless of whether or how far up or down the boost is. But a proportional Q actually narrows the Q. So as I do this, as I keep boosting and boosting and boosting and boosting, the Q is narrowing. And that helps you to really figure out where the frequencies that you want to get rid of are. So, in this case, you're down here in the chesty stuff, and then you've got your boxiness, and then you've got your nasally, whatever honk. But because it's a proportional cue, you're actually hearing a more narrow version of that. And then when you come back, same thing on the reverse. The longer I do that, the deeper the cut, the narrower the bandwidth is. But anyway, so that's a great tip. That the whole sweep technique, but in this particular case, considering it's proportional cue, it's extra important to really just crank it up. You know what I mean?
Totally. And then, man, talk about the top and the bottom in this EQ. They're kind of like they're fixed. They're fixed frequencies, but these frequencies were not chosen by accident. They are very much on purpose.
They're classic. I mean, this whole thing just screams classic. It's a classic of vintage, dare we say? And yeah, it's got really, really nice, smooth 10K shelf here, which can really bring to life an SM7 or a ribbon mic. So it encourages you to just it just sounds good. I mean, it keeps sounding good, almost no matter what I do with it, It's kind of deceptive in that way.
It really is. It's like, even when it's at an extreme setting, you're still like, man, that still actually sounds pretty good. It doesn't sound...
It's nice and silky and stuff, so... and then, the bottom, I mentioned that earlier here, 110, pretty, for voice, it's kind of it's a really good usable sort of, forward punchy sort of low end. Combined with the high pass at 80, this gives you the ability to really kind of shape and bring in bottom end. Let's say I have to be further away from the mic, right? We all know about proximity effect. So the further away, let's say I have to be this far away for because it's a podcast, right? And so I need to up the shelf here, right? To get back the low end that I miss when I'm up here like this, right? So when I can be like this, I don't need as much bottom end, but when I'm a foot away, I want a little bit more of the top and the bottom to restore that natural thing. So imagine, you're using this for podcast. And do you want to sound like this? With from a foot away on an insensitive mic? this, or do I really want to kind of pull me forward and bring me into the conversation, with these, but if I'm up close, I don't need as much of that. And so it's super flexible and lots of, great sounds. I mean, it's just meant to be fast and intuitive, and the frequencies, the cool frequencies, the good frequencies are picked for you. So it's really great in that sense.
Dude, Paul Crane's, he's a big Century fan, I can tell as well. He's like, dude, silky is a great word for this plugin, because that's totally right. And Drew, you're doing such a good job of showing off the power of this, of like being able to compensate for distance, being able to kind of polish up a sound. That's really what this plugin was. It was made with that in mind. It was like, how quick and easy can we make it to like polish a vocal, to polish a guitar, to like give it just what it needs, and not more or less. So the EQ is so good.
Yeah, it continues. I mean, over here, in the next module, it's, we have here an Opto style compressor. So, if we know anything about Optos, they generally don't have attack and release anyway, because it's inherent in the architecture. So it's a perfect choice. It's kind of like the no-brainer. It's the no-brainer compressor, like if you want to do a little bit of coloration and you want to level something out, that the Silver LA2, I mean, like, you just can't go wrong. Plop it in there, you get some nice saturation, nice coloration, a single knob to do it here. So what we have here is we have an Opto leveler, and there's one button, and it's auto makeup, right? So this is it's threshold. And so if I start with it, out of circuit, where I'm having to get up on the mic, and we've lost some gain, right? Because I've pulled it out of the circuit. But as I go up and I keep talking, as I raise this up, you're going to see our gain reduction meter starts to come into play, and simultaneously the algorithm, the plugin is making up the gain for me. So I don't really have to think about it. I can just play, I can sing, and I just know that I'm going to get the right amount of squeeze, the right amount of smooth. It's not going to come on too hard. It's not going to let go too fast. It's going to be nice and smooth, and I don't have to think about the output control of it. There's no makeup gain. It's just super handy and super clean and sweet, and it's a joy, just to talk through it. Even
It is. This is honestly, it is my go-to when I'm setting people up to, if someone comes to me and they're like, man, how do I get a great vocal sound really fast? And these are the plugins I have. My first guess is always to go to Century, because I got a great tube mic preamp, EQ with just enough bands and control to get a great sound. And then I'm truly addicted to the compressor in this one, because you're right, Drew. Like, being able to just have single knob, you're not thinking about attack release. You're just thinking like, is the sound good? Is the meter, am I crunching it too hard, or is it just right? Am I getting 1 or 2 or 3 dB how I like it? And then the fact that you get clean output gain at the end, you have colored input on the left hand side, on the input side you get tube flavor, opto compressor, just a really perfectly flexible EQ. It's hard to go wrong with the Century, man.
Yeah, Prince Jordan is asking a little bit more about the 10K and the 110. It's like, these are, there are classic designs out there that have been around for many, many decades. And, whether it's API gear that Saul Walker designed in 1968, or something Rupert Neve did in the 70s, right? There are just certain sort of, there are certain sort of known sort of ranges where people, where designers of historic gear have helped us, right? That's one of the reasons why I like gear. That's what drew me to UA, was digital versions of this gear where the designer of the EQ is holding my hand, right? They're holding my hand virtually, and showing me, oh, you probably want to boost 110. And I see some people who don't like APIs that go plus or minus 2 dB. I'm like, and they're like, well, what if I want 1? And I'm like, you don't. You just don't know you don't yet. It's like, it's like just choose 2, right? I mean, it's like, and move on. It's like these, and that's Saul Walker, holding your hand along the way. So anyway, they're just kind of classic known frequencies that have made famous by specific gear.
Well, and especially in the way that they're in the Century, like the curves for them, like as you guys hear, they're very they do exactly what you want. It's kind of like a simple car stereo EQ, right? Where like the top is giving you more top, but it's not making it brittle, but it's giving a little bit more life up there, right where you want it. And same for the 110. Like, here's some more low end, but it's not just subs. It's not this like low mid thing. It's this kind of just really like middle of the road bass So if you're like, cool, this bass sounds great, but I want a little bit more bass in my bass, a little bit of 110, like 1, 2, 3 dB, like, and at least for me, like this plugin really helps drive home the like, just listen and turn and don't think so hard about like how many dB I'm using of anything. I look at it, I listen to it, like, oh, is it too crunchy? Great, I'll just bring the level knob down a little bit and bring up my output. Oh, it's not crunchy enough? Cool, bring the output down a little bit, drive the whole thing a little bit harder, and it's a great plugin to learn how to gain stage things with because it gives you that feedback. It gives you the feedback on the tube preamp, it gives you the feedback in the compressor, and it really, you can learn very quickly the effect of turning something up here but turning it down here and vice versa.
Yeah, and this is just, you know, and I would say this is a great plugin for those of you, for those of our listeners who are a little fear of commitment. If you're one of those people who was trained or brought up to think that, oh, you should never commit anything, which to me just is craziness. But if you're one of those, this is a great stepping stone because this is you can't go wrong here. Like there's, I mean, you of course you can overcompress, whatever, but this is a great stepping stone into learning how to commit. And like, I mean, for, you know, who would choose to print this, right? I mean, again, I've tweaked the settings a bit, but like, who would choose to commit to print this or commit this? You know, when I can choose to commit this. Maybe I've gone a little overboard, but
no. It is still, dude. You went from like, and I hope you guys maybe depending on your experience with SM7, Drew, without this on, I know that sound. That is the SM7 sound. The boxiness, the like, it's fine, it's good, but I would always end up processing that with a little bit of EQ and compression. Yeah, and then you switch to Century on, and you're like, oh. There it is. There's that podcast sound that I've been looking for.
Well, and and you know, I'll tell you right now, like I'm not a singer, but like even just talking, like, if I had to listen to myself talk, I mean, this is not very inspiring. It just doesn't make me feel authoritative. It does. If I were a singer, like hearing this, like, you know, versus this, it's like, it's night and day, and I would give a better performance. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people who are afraid of committing, they don't realize that, you know, you impact the vocalist, you impact the player. The better you make it sound in the cans, the better you make it sound in the headphones, the more they're going to give you, you know, they're going to give you better performances. So
absolutely. And just really quickly as well, building on what Drew said, give a big shout out to the presets for Century Tube Channel Strip, because there are a lot of them, and they are some of the best well-labeled preset packs out of all of them, like male podcast or broadcast vocal, melodic rap, vintage keys, female rap.
Oh, wow.
Female
I've never seen these.
The rap overload from Ian Boxill. JJ Blair's got like an SM7 mic preset, which I'm gonna pull that up and compare to what Drew just did.
I was gonna say I should have saved myself. I could have saved myself a lot of time. I've never even looked at these.
Look at that. Well, see, he's doing it. He's taking out the lows here instead of with the high pass, adding a little bit higher presence peak. So he's kind of like doing similar.
He's also running the pre a lot cleaner too. Yeah,
exactly. Everything's on a lot lower setting there.
Yeah.
John Paterno, basic vocal, simple vocal, thick vocal. There are so many good presets in here, guys. Michael Romanowski, Richard Scheitchick, and of course, you know, I've got a couple of my personal presets built into here as well. But as always, a great place to start, guys, is, you know, Century is one of those ones that's like fairly easy to comprehend. I think with what Drew just showed us, you guys should be able to open it up, get in there, start experimenting. It's not an overwhelming plugin like some other channel strips we've run into, right? Like, if you guys remember the like 88RS or DFC, like we've gone all the way to some of the most complex channel strips possible to now the Century Tube channel strip, where everything is that's kind of right there. It's very intuitive what you got to do, which knobs to grab, how to dial in a sound. So yeah, love shouting out that there are those presets available, and they're a great starting point to, like, you know, see what somebody else, what their go-to is for SM7, then tweak from there. Really, really, really love it, guys. I've seen lots of good suggestions for shows. I think somebody was asking about like a tape show. Didn't we just do a tape show a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
all
we
right.
did.
Yeah, so I can't remember who was asking about a tape show, but we did do a tape show a few weeks ago. Just check the YouTube channel. You should be able to find that. Let me scroll back through the questions here, make sure. Scott was asking about our screens. Drew, you know, he was noticing that we see a lot of tracks, especially on your screen, I think on mine and Matt's as well. So I think we're all running 4K monitors here, which is why you're seeing us constantly having to zoom in to show the GUIs and kind of blow them up. But yeah, using like a 4K or a Retina monitor allows you to get a lot more real estate on the screen. So I highly recommend checking out higher. 1080p is, I think that's what my laptop, I typically have that set to. So yeah, you do see a lot less space. And if you check out last week's episode, we did 100 tips. Some of the tips in there, I think Matt, was it you or Drew that showed how to kind of hide some of the elements, hide the focus browser, hide the monitor section. You can hide certain elements of the Luna window to be able to gain a little bit more screen real estate for your tracks.
Yeah, just for more detail, like my screen is it's a 4K monitor, but I run it one level down, so mine is 3000 by 1700, it's 308 by 1692. Just if you want the actual, that's the actual screen resolution that I'm running.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Victor is the one asking about tape. So yeah, I just looked in our outline. It was May 24th we did the tape show. We did all the tape machines, but we didn't hit on the tape effects side. That is kind of correct. We touched really quickly on the EP 34 and the ATR 102 tape. They're kind of near the end of the show, I believe.
And they might get their own, like, who knows, maybe they'll eventually, I think, as far as these deep dives goes, the one like we just did on the Sentry, like once we've been doing the channel strips, but really, if you guys are responding to these, we'll just keep going. We'll just go through the whole library. So we could circle back around to them, I'm sure.
Yeah. Especially, I think, in the channel strip category, we haven't talked a lot about like some of the Neve channel strip, like the 1073, 1084.
Yeah.
I know Helios has come up a couple times, so yeah, we'll definitely look into talking about that. And there's a strong demand for UAD pillows.
I see that.
I may have done that with the Instagram post the other week of my pillows. A MIDI episode. Yep, I see DJ T3204. We've done a couple. We've touched on MIDI once or twice, kind of in context, but I don't know if we've done a big deep dive on MIDI. Have we, Matt?
I thought Matt
Very,
did one.
very long time ago. Yeah, last year.
Okay.
At the start of office hours, we did one, but yeah, might be time for another one pretty soon.
Yeah, agreed. Paul? What would you do for those pillows? That's what I really want to know. Or Lunar, you guys know all of the swag, all the merch that has been only like NAMM exclusive. You guys are naming them all. Talking about the bomber jackets from NAMM last year.
Oh yeah.
So, guys, man, well, this has been a really fun episode. It's been awesome kind of getting to geek out about all the things around samples and being able to kind of deep dive here into the Sentry as well. Raf's looking for a deep dive in rock pop vocals. Yeah, maybe like a whole vocal episode. That might be a good way to kind of bring a bunch of stuff all together.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good one.
So, yeah, great. You guys have got such amazing show ideas, great feedback, awesome questions as always. So yet again, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. That way you never miss an episode. In the meantime, if you guys, if you got more topics or questions in the interim, social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you can find us on all those platforms. But I want to give a special shout out, of course, to the UAD forums. Drew's constantly, I think he just keeps that tab open at all times on his computer. Because you'll inevitably, if you ask a question over there, Drew ends up seeing it, and we draw a lot of ideas and inspirations from the forum and what you guys are talking about over there. So it's uadforums.com. To jump in over there. It's a great community of people, just like all you lunatics hanging out here on Mondays. And of course, if you guys have got music to share, hit us up live@uaudio.com. If you've got photos, hashtag Universal Audio, and don't miss out on the half yearly sale. I think I mentioned at the top. Yep. And tomorrow, Black Pumas. UA Live.
Oh, yeah.
2 p.m.
Don't miss that one.
Yeah.
Like, there's if you clear your schedules, make a hole in your schedule tomorrow afternoon, guys, because this is gonna be an awesome show. We're gonna kind of let them play. Like, this is their chance to perform, and you guys get to hear what they do using the UA effects pedals. All in real time, and we'll ask a couple questions, and we'll do a little bit of chatting, but tomorrow's going to be all about the music, which I'm so excited to share. And naturally, of course, there's going to be a giveaway component to it, so we're giving away a set of pedals, and our partners over at Reverb.com are also giving away some Reverb.com gift certificates. So there's literally no reason to not show up to tomorrow's show. If not just for the music, show up for the giveaways and the hang with everybody. So yeah. guys, thank you so much again for watching. Thank you, Matt and Drew, for, as always, for helping put these shows together and sharing the knowledge as we do. This is it's such a great way to wake up on Mondays and geek out with you guys.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun.
Hell yeah, man.
Hell yeah. Awesome, guys. Well, everybody have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you back here next time. Peace.
See ya.